Hey, hi, and howdy to all my sweet friends out there. Welcome back to my channel for another What's for Dinner video. This week I have 3 fun, easy, and budget-friendly recipes that I am sharing with you guys. And they are so delicious and so perfect for fall, because even down here in Texas, the weather is finally starting to cool off a little bit more. It's time to turn on the oven. It's time to make casseroles. It's just a wonderful time of year. All right, let's kick it off with French onion pork chop bake. This is my own personal recipe. I just kind of added pork chops to the stick of butter rice recipe that you can find on Pinterest. I will link it down below. So I took my pork chops and I got these buy one get one free at Market Street like a week or so ago. So this was actually a really good deal. Whenever they have their sales that come out every Wednesday, I always check their sale flyer for Market Street or United. It's the same thing. And they tend to have buy one, get one sales on meats and sometimes on produce as well. And I always hit that store up because they have pork chops, they have ribs, they do chicken, they do ground beef. It's always worth a look. So if you live near a United or a Market Street, make sure you're checking those sale flyers every single week. So I just took my pack of pork chops and seasoned them with some salt and pepper, and then I use my Kinder's Italian seasoning blend, but you can really use any spice blend that you like, whether it's like Badia Complete or some of that Slap Your Mama seasoning, any of that kind of stuff that you guys like. Go ahead and just throw that on the outside. We just want to develop a little bit of flavor. Now my pork chops are super thick, but I wanted to get a little bit of color and crust on the outside before we bake this casserole, just because it's going to add another element of flavor. Meats like pork and chicken can be really bland, even if you're baking them in a casserole. I wanted to make sure that this pork had tons of flavor. So not only am I seasoning it well, but I'm going to develop a little bit of color on the outsides. It will not cook all the way through right now because it is so thick, but that's fine. We're going to bake it in the casserole. No big deal. Look at that beautiful crust. That is exactly what I'm looking for. That color that you see there equals flavor. All right, well, that's finishing doing its thing on the second side. We're going to go ahead and get the casserole going. I've got about 1.5 cups of rice there. And then I'm going to dump in a can of French onion soup. You just pour it straight in there, and the recipe calls for a can of beef consomme or beef broth, which I don't have. So I just took that French onion soup can and filled it with water and dumped it in that bowl, and I'm going to mix it with some bouillon. That also helped to get the last of the onions and stuff out of that can so we don't waste anything, we don't lose any flavor. And I mixed in my bouillon. I use that beef base. I get it at Sam's Club. It's just like the Better Than Bouillon. It's just the Members Mark brand. And I just try to mix it in. It never mixes in all that well, but that's okay. We got some of it going, and I'll just stir it right on into the rest of this casserole. One thing that I did add in here, and I guess I wasn't filming, was I did about 1 tablespoon of Worcestershire sauce. I always feel like it kind of kicks up that beefy flavor. I also added in some diced up celery and diced up diced up carrots. You don't have to do that, but I was kind of looking for those fall vibes, and I felt like they were going to bring that to the table, and they really did. I highly recommend it. It just really gives it a nice, fun fall flavor. And then I went ahead and nestled my pork chops on top. And you're going to see here in a minute that I'm going to cover this tightly with foil, just like you're supposed to for the stick of butter rice. And I'm going to pop it in the oven, and then realize that I forgot to put the stick of butter on there. So I forgot to film that part, but I did pull it back out, and I only put half a stick of butter. I don't think it needs the full stick. But just chop it up or slice it up, and place it on top. And then follow the baking instructions. And I opted to melt some Swiss cheese on 2 of my pork chops, which I'm going to say I actually ended up just pulling off. I didn't feel like the cheese went well with the rice like I pictured it would, but the casserole was amazing. We love it. I cannot recommend it nearly enough, and we just served it with veggies and dip on the side. I will link the stick of butter recipe down below, and I just threw some pork chops on top. So delicious. All right, RUNZAs. I was going to make this a couple of weeks ago. Apparently it's like a Nebraska favorite. I've never been to Nebraska. I don't know anybody from Nebraska. So if you guys have any information about it, fill me in. I got to tell you though, these are fabulous. I didn't get to make them a couple of weeks ago because I forgot to get cabbage, but I've got my cabbage now. So I just halved the recipe because I didn't need a whole ton of these. So I did half a head of cabbage. I did half a large onion, and I'm going to do 1 pound of ground beef. The recipe, of course, calls for double that. So I've got my cabbage chopped up and my onion diced, and I threw it in my skillet with a little bit of butter and a little bit of oil to keep the butter from burning. And then I'm just going to season it with salt, pepper, and garlic powder. We're keeping it simple, and it was perfect this way. So I let this cook for quite a while. I really wanted the cabbage to soften up quite a bit before I added in the ground beef. Cabbage is one of those vegetables that can take a little while to cook. So this probably did about 12 minutes or so before I added in the beef. So while it was doing its thing, I decided to make some air fryer cauliflower, which is one of our absolute favorite sides. I have not shown this on my channel in a while, so I decided I would do it. I've got about 6 cups of cauliflower there, and it's just fresh cauliflower that I just chopped off the head and just made it into bite-sized pieces. And I put about a 1/4 cup of mayonnaise in there. I don't use butter. I don't use olive oil for this. I use mayonnaise, and it adds a little extra flavor, but it also aids in the browning and crisping process. I love it. If you've ever seen people use mayonnaise to make a grilled cheese sandwich instead of butter, it's the same idea. It just helps to kind of fry it in place of butter or oil. So once I got the mayonnaise evenly distributed all over the cauliflower, I added in about a tablespoon of dill, and then I hit it with some garlic salt. If you don't have garlic salt, do garlic powder and salt. A little bit of onion powder if you want to. Sometimes I do and sometimes I don't. On this particular day, I opted not to, but it does, it tastes great. It kind of gives it almost a ranchy flavor. And then I add in pepper. And that is it. Just stir it up, evenly distribute it. It's not as overpowering as like a ranch seasoning would be, but it has a fabulous flavor when you cook it. You get the onion and you get the garlic and you get the dill, and it's just really, really good. And of course it caramelizes, it gets crispy from the mayonnaise on the cauliflower. So when I was done with that, I checked my cabbage, and it's almost where I want it to be, but not quite. So this needed just a couple more minutes, and I let it do its thing. You can see it starting to brown at this point, which is exactly what we want. So I just kind of made some space in the middle of the pan, and I threw in 1 pound of ground beef, and then I used my little tool to go ahead and start breaking that up. We are going to go ahead and re-season the ground beef just like we seasoned the cabbage. We want to season all of our layers. That way nothing is bland. Everything is like popping with flavor. That's really what you want. I think one thing that I am guilty of in the past, and I've gotten better about it, and I bet a lot of other people are, because I hear jokes about it all over TikTok, we don't season our food. Like, we're afraid to really put a lot of seasoning on there, but your food can take a lot of seasoning. So I season all of my layers. I'm not shy with it. I make sure that everything has tons of flavor, and that'll make your food taste good. Even if you're just eating veggies, it'll really amp up that flavor, and you will enjoy them so much more. So I just crumbled up my ground beef and let it finish cooking, and while it was finishing up, I came over to get started on my dough. This is just pizza dough that I had in my freezer. It's actually the one from the tube that you buy at the grocery store. When I was putting it in the refrigerator, I had it kind of standing up, and then I shoved something in next to it, and when it fell over, it popped open, and I didn't need to use it then, and I didn't want to waste it, so I just put it in the freezer so it would stay good, and it turned out perfectly. And I just divided it up into even portions, and I'm going to just kind of roll this out. I am not good at rolling out dough. If you guys have seen me make tortillas or whatever, they taste great, but the shape is always like questionable at best. So I'm just going to do my best to kind of roll these into rectangles. I don't have any tips and tricks for rolling out dough. It's not something I'm good at. It's just not. But you know what? At the end of the day, it may not be the prettiest thing, but I got to tell you, my entire family loved these. They were fantastic. The flavor was amazing, and they were super cheap and super simple. If you want to cut costs, you can make this with homemade dough, which is what I would normally do. And if you guys have been watching for a little while, my stand mixer broke. I got a new one finally, so I will be making my dough again like I always have in the past. Anyway, I just rolled these up tightly, kind of like a Hot Pocket. Think Hot Pockets when you're doing these. It's kind of similar to that. We'll do one more together. Make sure that your surface is nice and floured so that your dough doesn't stick, and just kind of work it and roll it into, I say rectangle. You could do a circle if you really wanted to. I just thought rectangles were a little bit easier to fold up and stuff. And I am careful to pinch the seams together so that it holds closed really well. And none of these burst open, so I was very pleased with that. A lot of times when I make stuff like homemade Hot Pockets or anything like that, I have at least 1 or 2 that pop open. None of these did. I was giving those edges some nice good pinches just to keep it nice and sealed, and it worked out beautifully. This was really so good. I was surprised at how few ingredients that I put in here and how amazing this tasted. I don't know what y'all are doing up in Nebraska, but y'all just came up with a winner here. This is such a delicious recipe. The next thing I did, and I'm not sure the recipe didn't call for this, I just did it because I thought it'd be good, was I melted about a tablespoon of butter, and then I brushed it over the outside of my RUNZAs, and I'm just going to stick some sesame seeds on top. The butter's just to kind of help the sesame seeds adhere. You could use water, you could do an egg wash. I hear that butter is supposed to help brown dough. For whatever reason, I just never have any success in getting a beautiful brown color on any dough that I make ever. So I thought I would give butter a shot because I have definitely tried egg washes in the past with no success. And I got to say, I didn't develop any color with this either. But the flavor was so on point. So, so good. And I loved the sesame seeds on top. There's our air fried cauliflower. And there's the RUNZA. So, so good. Recipe will be listed down below. All right, the final meal of the week is a Crocktober crock pot recipe. Okay, it's a slow cooker recipe for me because I don't have a crock pot. I'm using my Ninja Foodie, which does slow cook. We're gonna make some red beans and rice. This is a classic. This is easy. This is cheap. You need some sausage. The only kind I had in my freezer was jalapeno, which I did not want to put in here because I saved that for grilling. So we ended up using Little Smokies, which is perfectly fine. Those oftentimes go on sale at Sam's Club for a really, really good price, and I pick them up and I'll just bring them home and divide them up, repackage them, and put them in the freezer. So that's what I pulled out now. I also diced up some celery, onion, and bell pepper. Threw that right on in there, and then we've got our red beans. They're rinsed and sorted, and then some bouillon, some chicken bouillon. You can use regular chicken broth if that's what you have. Of course I don't. I always use bouillon. I threw in a couple of bay leaves, a pretty heavy handful of garlic powder, a little bit of thyme, and then some paprika. And you're going to want to make sure that you add enough water to cover the beans by, like 1.5 to 2 inches. Or if you're using chicken broth, that much chicken broth. I really do recommend for a recipe like this just going with water because it's kind of like uncertain how much chicken broth you're going to need. That way you can just adjust as needed. For me, this was about 6.5 cups or so. For you, it might vary just depending on how much stuff you throw in there. I didn't really measure mine. I just threw in what looked good and just kind of went with it. And then I let this slow cook all day long and served it over rice. Absolutely amazing. So delicious and so full of flavor, but so easy. That was my Crocktober recipe for the week. I hope you guys enjoyed it. This is what we had. It was delightful. Thank you guys so much for joining me here. I appreciate y'all so much. And if you haven't already, make sure you like and subscribe. All right, I will see you guys soon with another video. Bye.